Hello, world, and welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. And welcome back to sharing parts of my story. Very specific parts, because the podcast as a whole, I share my life, but this is sharing my trauma story and healing journey, specifically going back on the timeline, sharing it with you all, and the whole picture from when it started in the middle of it, the messiness, the figuring some things out, starting the healing journey to now. It's kind of my plan of how I reveal these things to you while also still releasing real-time episodes. So, yeah, time warps all around. Time is an illusion. Everything is always happening at once. Anyway, lovely life that we live. But also a welcome again to my discomfort. Yeah, that's real. That's right now. And if you've listened to the last couple solo episodes, you will know that the victim part of self and that shadow aspect has been really coming to the forefront, especially since, the whole thing, but yeah, especially since episode 56 because that was the getting into a trauma bond episode. That was the first time that I've publicly spoken about that relationship. So then when the podcast was out initially in 2021, I was still living with that person. We were separated. I was on the way out officially, completely. But in that time when the podcast first released and I was telling my story, I left that part out for safety reasons because I was still tied to him in various ways. And then in 2022 we took it down even though we were divorced and fully ties are cut and would have been the place to share it, but I did not. And here we are to do it again. No more hiding. I'm just gonna keep telling myself that and you all. I'm here in the discomfort, in the newness of sharing this aspect publicly. And yeah, no more hiding, which is kind of scary. But where I left off, and this is part six, and I'm taking the vision for this is I'm taking you through the whole process, like what I just mentioned was where it started for me and the middle. And right now where I'm sharing is like we're in the middle of it, of this story, and the thick of it, of like actually living in the darkness and operating off of trauma programmings and my shadows running the show. So that's where we're at right now. And where I left off of talking about the trauma bonded relationship was when I had, in that episode, is when I had broken up with him the first time. So that was summer of 2017 is when we had broken up. And we just moved in together too. And what I really want to highlight on this episode about this part of the story is how how I didn't have the capacity to maintain living a life free of trauma. Like, yes, I broke up with that person because I knew that this wasn't healthy and this was harmful in so many different ways. But my everything, my psyche, my body was so used to living in states like that and being disassociated and disconnected from my body that it did not know how to exist in a life that wasn't traumatic, in a life where trauma wasn't constantly happening, or to where I was not in survival mode. And so this chunk that I'm going to share today is showing that representation. And then how, because of that, because I didn't have the capacity to maintain freedom, I fell back into trauma, which is fucking wild to think about. So, like that, our capacity and our ability to have a relationship with our darkness, to feel our feelings and our pain, and to tend to all of our needs is what keeps us free from suffering. But if we don't have the tools, the resources, because a lot of the world doesn't support those resources in general, so like It's a both and it's on us, and we also live in a system that perpetuates this because it keeps us disconnected. It keeps us away from our power. Like it's a very smart, fucked up design in that way. Because if everyone's just disconnected from their body and their power, then we're all going to be living in trauma and in survival mode, and freedom is always just going to be out of reach. So the capacity of being with discomfort is a direct link to being able to maintain freedom when you choose differently, when you get out of harmful situations, when you try something new or even move, or it doesn't even have to be getting out of trauma. It's like starting a new job or starting a business or getting in a lovely relationship. Like, can you maintain that? That is in relation to the capacity that you have to be with discomfort, your internal world, and your darkness. And I didn't have that capacity. So here we go. Let me tell you how little capacity I had. The one, leaving him was a really hard decision to make because I did live in such a disassociative state and I wasn't connected to my body. I didn't understand the language of my body. That the day of moving out, I was still struggling with whether or not this was the right decision because my everything, I was just existing in uncertainty. My body was going haywire, and I had this misconception that the quote unquote right decision would be easy and I would have clarity and everything would be smooth. Uh, Bless that. That's literal fantasy of an idea. But I didn't know any better. And so with that perception of, oh, when I make the right decisions for myself in my life, that's what it's supposed to be. When that's not what my experience was, I was really struggling, like, oh, is this what I'm meant to do? Because I still feel like absolute shit when I'm packing up everything right now, even though some parts of me knew like I needed to leave. So that discernment was not there, and I almost stayed. Uh, and I was looking to my friends to like, and they knew that they couldn't fully give me the answer, but I was try searching. So I was searching for the answer of like, please tell me exactly what to do. Do I need to leave this person? But at the end of the day, even if you do have all the tools and all the right resources and support and the people um, that would be able to be honest with you, you still have to make the choice to save yourself. And so they could have provided me with all the right answers in that moment, but it still needed to be me that made that decision and took action from that place. It's also that day of moving out since we were living together. And I mentioned it in episode 56, but it was had to be very planned and strategic of he came home for lunch every day. And after he went back to work, then there was only a certain amount of time before he would come back home. And then that was the time to pack all my shit up. And so then as everything was happening so fast, because we had a time limit, it was like, oh my God, this is real, we're doing it. And I essentially couldn't go back. And I knew that everything needed to be out of there before he came back. And then me saying, hey, I'm breaking up with you, because if everything was still there before I had that conversation, I knew that he would have convinced me to stay. Because he did. He tried to when we had that conversation. And something that I said in episode 56 also that I want to bring back to the forefront, which is oddly enough coming up again in real life in different situations, less intense, but it's kind of peeking its head around the corner for further integration. But what I spoke about then in these type of relationships and trauma bonds is like, well, one is a two-way street. So it's also two people engaging, me also being and deciding to be in this dynamic too. So it's not all on him. But the thing is that people show you who they are early, and you need to believe them. When we first started relating, within the first month, there was a violation of my body. Like that right there already showed me everything that I needed to know in that moment of how he was operating right then and there. And then that obviously got worse as the relationship continued and progressed into a marriage. And that was one of the main pain points within the relationship. So, but that happened early. So when there's a question of how do you know though, or how can you not get in a trauma bond or catch it before you're fully bonded or attached to that person, like even if you may be living in a disconnected and disassociative state like I was, I knew there, like people show you who you are, who they are early, but I chose to not believe it and gaslight myself into whatever and fawning, and then survival mode came in. And then at the end, the first breakup, when he said, like, I thought, when he knew that I was not staying, then he said, I thought that I could do whatever I wanted and you would never leave me. And that right there was a very big eye opener of how did I get here? How did I get to this point where someone that we're supposed to be in this loving relationship has that belief in this thought and how they can treat me? And why have I stayed this long? But that was way too much. Like it was an awakening for sure of like, I knew that you thought that, but then hearing that come out of your mouth, confirming that I do need to leave. And right now, in this present moment, I feel that part of self pretty strongly in my chest, and I hear her in my voice. Like I'm speaking differently. My voice is lower, it's or speaking more slowly. I feel a sense of heaviness. And then I'm also kind of in my head a little bit of, oh, maybe this is too heavy, and maybe like this is the struggle, guys, of like, oh, why share this? Because it is dark and it is heavy. And even though you're not like really going into details, like people can sense it and feel it in the way that you speak. And then the protector's part of self coming in saying like no one wants to hear that. Like get back to the the quick somatic tools or the fun art stuff or like the uplifting stories, be anywhere else except right here in the mess. Because this is it. Like this part of my story is the messiest. Is the messiest. And it's been a journey again and again to love that messiness, to love those dark parts of my life, to love who I was in those moments, to let them be seen and trying my best to let them be seen shamelessly and that there is nothing wrong with them. And as I allow them to continue to be seen and heard through me and just my own existence as Kelsey, but now I'm taking it even further while putting it on the podcast and not never knowing who would come across it. Um, the more I step into that courage and that power and shining light on the dark and really coming back into unconditional love every step of the way, that's how freedom is here. And being in this muck right now and this discomfort, because it's fucking uncomfortable right now. And this is what I mean by like, can we expand our capacity to be with discomfort? Can we let our darkness be seen? Can we let that be okay? And can we let it be okay that it's heavy? And can you, listeners, also sit in that and witness me in it and hold space with me as you click on these episodes of certain ones that are going to be more heavy? That there's no that it just is, because this is real life. It isn't some fairy tale, and that we just quickly get to the person overcoming it all, because that's not where this part of the story is at right now. It looked like it because she was leaving the relationship. But yeah, I'll continue on because then that's when you leave, then things are really revealed, because that relationship was so big and taking up so much space and traumatic for both of us, that then when you leave something like that, how much space is here now, then the shadows come to play. Then your pain is right here in front of you. Can you hold it? Or are we going to continue in patterns and cycles of disconnection, disassociation, numbness, escaping? Because where did that get us in the first place? Into a relationship that perpetuates trauma that we experienced from the past. So even if you leave the relationship, if we don't feel what we need to feel and we escape and all those things, like that's how cycles continue. I would just get back to where I was, and I did because I went back to him. That's a story for a different episode, but okay. I feel a shift in my voice, and I know you can hear it now too. I needed to pause and speak on that, and that what was with me right here in this moment as I was sharing, and that density and that heaviness, and turn and face it and acknowledge, like, okay, I see you, I feel you, you are right here with all of us right now as we're broadcasting what's happening in real time for our internal world. That, yeah, just that reminder of it's heavy, and I don't need to make an excuse for it, or try to make it seem less messy. I just need to let it be messy right now. But yeah, to close the loop on that particular point of people show you who they are early and you need to believe them. It doesn't mean that's who they are at their core or their existence, but it does mean that's how they're operating right now in this current moment, and to not fall for potential. Because that's what I did. And like, as they show you who they are, do you want to stay? Because how my body felt in that moment of when those first interactions of the violation of my body, that was my body already trying to communicate to me of like, if this happened at the beginning, this is only going to continue, and get out now. But I didn't. And yeah, so I think I'm going to continue to speak on that topic in general, and maybe ground that in a little more, because I'm obviously having trouble grounding it right now because my brain's on story mode, trying to be on story mode. But yeah, just let that little bit marinate for you all, how that lands for you, and how can you start to see that in your daily life, because it also can be small things, like how are you relating to coworkers, how are you relating to other friends, or how are you choosing jobs or hobbies, like in all these different ways of relating to people and building connections, like it's through and through of paying attention to that. So when moving out, I didn't tell my parents. We were estranged at that time, so I didn't tell them right away. And so it was just my friends and then my friends' parents that was helping me move out, and my stuff was kind of scattered. And then I stayed at a friend's house for about 2 months, and until I was able to get my own place. And all of that too is happening so fast. Like right after I broke up with him, the very next week, I started grad school to study and become an art therapist. Who would imagine with the timing of that? And when I was in grad school, so I was on an online program, and the first week of every semester is called residency, and you had to be on campus. And so that's where you got to like meet everybody, your cohort, your professors, go over all of that. And that was the start of the semester. It was the very beginning. So I went to campus, and that's when all my trauma, previous sexual trauma, came slamming to the surface, and realized I had never dealt with any of it. Like I knew jack shit about healing, honestly. It was very, very humbling. And this is what I mean about the capacity component was me just leaving a trauma bonded relationship, moving out, living on my own for the first time, figuring that out first, and then having to go to my job to get more hours to be able to provide for that, and then starting grad school. Like all of that happening at once. That's that's so many things. And then my trauma from the past coming to the surface, like no fucking wonder I didn't have the capacity to manage all of that and to feel all that, to hold it all. Like what the fuck do we do with all this? Like, yes, at residency, it was a nice little bubble that was just literally 1 week's time. And I was making a lot of art, writing a lot of poetry, but then I came back to reality of of the life that I now am living and that space that I just created by leaving my internal world was coming forward to like be seen and held, and everything that I was shoving down and disconnected from by being in that relationship was now here. But I didn't know what to do with that. So I continued on of distracting myself. I distracted myself with dating, trying to date immediately after that, and hooking up with people in the name of like quote unquote my sexual power of like taking that back. Like that's what I was telling myself that I was doing, doing hookups of like, oh, I'm having sex on my terms now and in the way that I want to, and I get to decide and I get to choose. And but it was at the expense of still strangers, like me and my body relating to strangers and then never speaking to them again. And but then trying to date in a way of filling voids. And then there I was drinking a lot and smoking and working full time, going to the gym and started grad school, like all of that, doing all of that to fill all of the space that I just created. Of course, I didn't know that I was doing any of that at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. But if you truly look at your life and your daily habits, your self-care, how you maintain your home, and just how you tend to your physical, emotional, social, and spiritual being is going to be a direct mirror for where you're at in relating to your darkness. So all those habits of escapism in my actual place was completely trashed, was showing that there was no relationship of my internal world in my darkness, and no caring for the self and no tending to the self. What it was showing me was that my darkness, my shadows, was ruling me, and that I was doing, and it's the thing too here is to remember to have grace for yourself because I didn't have the tools yet. You don't know what you don't know. I was going to school to figure out, little did I know about that. But so because all those things of the like trying to date and the drinking, the smoking, the gym, the like working full time, grad school full, like all of that, like that's so much time, right? All of that was also a means to protect myself from the pain that was trying to surface. Because on some level, like my body knew that I couldn't handle it. So then it was like, let's distract and numb and escape and avoid because this is too much for her. So that's where the grace and compassion comes in of when our darkness and our shadows is ruling the present moment because we're doing the best we can with the tools that we have. But then the caveat is when that goes on long enough, at to what expense? Because we're still harming ourselves and it can get to the point to where we harm others, which is what happens in trauma bonded relationships. There's like that giver and the receiver of the harm, and then both kind of still happen at the same time too, um, when we're doing that to fill voids. And that, all of that though, of how are we living our life? Is darkness ruling it? And what are we doing to protect ourselves from feeling the pain? And is it through means of escapism? Obviously, it wasn't until later realizing it, but I was living a life in reaction to my trauma instead of living life as a response of the embodiment of my soul and who I truly am. but I had no fucking idea about any of that. I had no idea that I was escaping or using external means uh to fill my own voids. Like I didn't even know that I needed help. That's that like completely unconscious operating, automatic operating, automatically existing off of old patterns, programs, which were for me of trauma and shadows. Because our shadows are not innately bad. Like my shadows of how I was utilizing dating and how I was drinking and smoking and um just not being present was to protect me from that pain. And then there was a whole moment years later of realizing like meeting those parts of self and those protectors of like, thank you for trying to protect me from feeling the pain because I was obviously showing up in a way that was revealing that I couldn't handle it. But I need, well, one, us to build a relationship, but two, like I need you to start to step aside because not feeling the pain is hurting me more than you protecting me from feeling the pain. So I need to start feeling my own pain so I don't keep causing and creating my own pain. But in 2017, it was too much and I couldn't face it. And I looked for means even further to distract. And how I did that is then I did eventually reach back out to my ex. Because if because with that specifically, when we go back to people that we know that it's a harmful relationship and is just causing pain all around, because it's causing him pain too. It's not just me. When we do that, when we go back, then there really is no space to feel our pain from the past because now we're existing again in the present moment of trauma. And that gets to be the ultimate distraction instead of feeling the pain of our past because the present is now painful again. So I went back into disassociation and survival mode by doing that, which took up all the space all over again. And what's weird, wild, like I don't even know what verbiage to use here is even then, like I knew that wasn't good for me. When I reached out, went before I went to go to his house, I took a couple shots before I even went there. So it's like I already knew. It's like I didn't even want to be fully present and in my body before I went to go see him, that I drank before I went. I was like, oh, we'll just take a couple shots now. It won't hit me until I'm there. And then when I'm there, I will, whatever, and I can actually be there, quote, be there, but I'm not actually there. What a wild existing it is to be human. That was really only just a few months, like 5.5 months, I would say, of when we had broken up. And then I reached out to him again, specifically to have sex. And then from there we fell back into a relationship. So to recap, because we went we went on a journey um of this time period. So this what I just shared was just a 5.5 month time period. But we broke up in the summer of 2017. A week later, I started grad school, and then I moved in with a friend. And then I went to my job saying I needed to work more because I just left a not so great situation and now I need more financial means, which thank God they were able to do that. And I was able to work full time. And then working full time, then living alone, yeah, being a grad school full time. I was also training to be I was a bodybuilder at the time and I was training for a show and it was like right when my show was about to start and I ended up not being able to do the show because of all the shit that was happening and hit the fan. And I was pretty upset about that because I trained for a very long time and I like that was the best physique that I had and for it to just like go to shit right at the end, um that was devastating, honestly. And then binge eating started and along so I didn't even mention that, but yeah, then along when I realized I wasn't able to do the show, then all like because that was taking up so much space of training for a bodybuilding show. So no longer being in a relationship, no longer training for a bodybuilding show, and then starting grad school, all of this. Then the drinking started, smoking, binge eating, going out, and meeting or feel random people to hook up with, and then also trying to be in relationships. In my place being absolutely disgusting that whole time, like barely functioning. And even with that, this is also, even with all those means of distraction, the pain was still too much to handle to where I went back in the relationship to be in that pain instead of the pain of my own misery. We'll just like keep creating it and be in it. Uh, yeah, this is really where the compassion comes in. Like when you say it out loud again and you're reflecting on that time period, and like I really don't like I say that and then I just stop myself in the middle of saying it. So I say like I really don't even know who that person is anymore. But I do because she still is me and of me. But I know that that would never happen again. And I can say that very confidently as far as a relationship like that will never happen again. And I know that because of what I've been able to integrate from all of this experience. Because I did eventually get to a point of where I was able to be with all of this pain. And when we reflect back on these times, again, showing ourselves that love, acceptance, and compassion, because she had no idea about anything when it came to healing, emotions, emotional awareness, shadows, darkness. Like she didn't, none of that was there. And I love her dearly. And this is her story. Messy delivery on maybe a little bit on the story. Maybe we're like, where are we at? We're jumping around. Stay on track, Kelsey. What we doing? But that's also part of it, right? The messiness that even this and sharing is also going to be messy and not always perfect and put together or provide you with so much wisdom, insight for learning nuggets. Yeah, that's not what this is always going to be either. But thank you for being here in this episode of the messiness, of the ups, the downs, the all over the place of not be staying on track of the story. But we did it eventually. Yeah, I'm gonna end it there because then it's a whole other thing of the process of when I did get back in relationship with him. So that'll be the next little go around of the story. Because then when yeah, you'll just figure out. Because then we're on a different level of momentum. Because that's when my spiritual awakenings started to creep in. But thank you again. Thank you for being here. And remember, when we see the light in ourselves, we create light in others.